Hello, good morning, and welcome to Wirelive, Direct versus Indirect. Thanks for joining us live, or perhaps as a pre-recording at a later date. My name's Rob, I'm the CEO of Pax8 in the UK, and I'm joined by two amazing panelists, if I may say so, my learned colleagues, as I referred to them in the dress rehearsal yesterday, which they did enjoy. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Yeah, I've never been called a learned friend ever in my life, so I just enjoyed the moment yesterday.
Definitely not me.
Yeah, so I'm Phil Morgan, and I run a channel here at Pax8, which is basically, I'm an evangelist that goes around telling the whole world how wonderful as a company we are.
Superb. My name's Ken McDonald. I am the VP of Wirelive and Partner Services at Pax8. And gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be on the sofa with you today.
Yes, likewise.
And a very comfortable sofa it is too. A little more comfortable than this velvet chair, although it does look quite stylish. And, you know, I feel this is my Gary Lineker moment, right? I'm in a separate chair.
Yeah,
and we're going to see your sports presenter moment shortly, aren't we? So thanks for joining us. Hopefully, if you've made it this far, you have some idea what we're on about. Direct versus indirect could mean a lot of things, but today it means all things Microsoft. Most people watching this today are probably MSPs or people that are engaged with Microsoft in some way. And the direct-indirect debate is one that's been really raging for some time, I think, and has been evolving over the last few years as well. And what this refers to is the two different ways which you can engage with Microsoft to buy their services and essentially resell them to your customers, whether that's bundled up as part of IP and more of a kind of ISV style play, or just a straight pass-through of licenses for something like Office 365, Microsoft Azure, or perhaps their Dynamics platform, which are the kind of three big areas that Microsoft had a lot of success with. And there's been a number of changes over the last few years, notably the annual revenue requirement to be a direct CSP has increased to $300,000 a year. They've also introduced some mandatory requirements for paid support packages, which are, you know, fairly arduous. Yeah, absolutely. So it's a debate that a lot of businesses are wrestling with. And so we thought, well, let's get out and talk to the channel, right?
Yeah.
Send our roving reporter on the road.
Come on.
And see what the opinions are in different types of businesses, because, you know, no two MSPs are created equal. So many different shapes and sizes, different industry specializations, different requirements. And so we thought, let's see, you know, let's take the temperature and see what the men and women on the street have to say. Is that fair?
The real people.
The real people, not us in the studio, the real people.
The real people.
So we're going to bring you a short video recorded a few weeks ago at Channel Sec in London, and a few online interviews that we were able to do as well. And then we're going to come back live in the studio, discuss the video, and then take your questions as well. So please do get your questions in on the website. There should be a box just to the right of this video if you're watching live with us. And we look forward to answering all of those questions shortly. Enjoy the interview.
Hey, I'm Philip Morgan, Chief Channel Officer at Pax8 UK, and I'm here at Channel Sec today talking to all kinds of technology providers about everything security and cloud. And one of the questions we're asking today in terms of someone's Microsoft relationship is direct or indirect? Which is the best choice for your business and organization? So we're asking all kinds of different questions about what it means to someone's business, the implications, and fundamentally the profitability and operation of their business as a result of that choice. So Simon, one of the questions we've been asking a lot of MSPs today is direct or indirect, which choice is right for your business? And I know you've had a background in working in some big companies and some smaller companies in your career. So tell me, what do you think is the choice that's right for a CSP today?
For a CSP today, definitely indirect. With the complexity with Microsoft, the pricing, the engineering, the accreditations, you know, it's just a whole minefield. And when we've been in direct, and in particular with Pax8, we've just found it so much easier, so uncomplicated, simple. The reporting's brilliant. I mean, I can't, you know, fault Pax8's approach to the whole Microsoft licensing products. It's just great.
So I want to grab some time with you today, to talk to our audience about this issue of direct or indirect Microsoft. Yep. Which choice have you taken for your business, first of all?
Indirect for us. I feel we get more value going through a partnership program. We get a direct account manager with Pax8, which is the guy's always there when we need him. It's an extra man in the team almost. Whereas if we were to go direct, I think the issue we would have is we would lose the ability to really build that relationship. We value our relationships with our trusted partners, whereas we can do that with Pax8.
Well, our business is a managed service provider. We are indirect Microsoft provider. We went through the journey going from direct to indirect. And to be honest, that change that Microsoft enforced on us, it was quite a significant one. However, I think it's a change for the better, to be honest, because it going indirect, going through a distribution, actually helped us grow the business quicker without any of the obstacles that Microsoft is actually, to be honest, throwing our way.
So talk to us a little bit about those obstacles. So for a moment, let's talk about when you were direct with Microsoft. What were the big challenges in your business?
So the biggest challenges is all the requirements that come with the direct relations with Microsoft. All the certifications that are required, all the points, and all the, all the admin around it that you need to provide to Microsoft to uphold your direct reseller status.
So if you were to put a cost on that for your business, comparing how you used to do it to how you do it now, what would you say the kind of the cost benefit to that in your business right now is?
I mean, the total cost of ownership of being a direct reseller, I reckon, is way more than going indirect, because you need to pay for technicians that are certified, you need to pay for all the admin, we need to pay for all the billing platforms that come with the direct relationship with Microsoft. I don't think working in SMB, SME market, I don't think it's worth it.
So a lot of people say that they feel that there's a lot of kudos from being direct themselves, so they can say to their partners they're direct, etc. Does that question come up in conversations that you're having? How do you handle that?
No, I've not been asked. Any of my customers that I've asked to come over, in particular from directly from Microsoft, have said that's fine, no problems at all. Never asked where I'm going if I'm dealing directly. And actually, only the other day, we've got some licenses with Pax8. I upgraded someone's licenses, a couple of licenses they wanted, emailed him back within 10 minutes and said I've done it, and he was gobsmacked because that usually through directly with Microsoft would have taken him a week.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, it's just simplicity, and for me as a provider, I need that simplicity. I don't need to be trying to jump through hoops for Microsoft. All the time I can save is better for me, right?
So a lot of people feel that being direct with a provider, being able to use that as a badge, is a big thing in someone's business. So it's unusual that you would say those things. Why do you think MSPs would not want to be direct with Microsoft and have that as a badge?
I think it depends what your sort of ethos is. Is it about badges and looking good, or is it actually about adding value, actual value, and how you're going to fix things on an operational level? Because it all sounds very good, but when it hits the fan, and believe me, working as an MSP, it does. We need to get answers quickly. It's great working with the likes of yourself and the team, because when we have an issue, they're there for us. It's arm around the shoulder approach, inclusive, in it together. And I generally don't think we'd get that level of support because the size of the business that we are with someone like Microsoft.
So thanks for your time today. One last question, if I can, Chris, before you go. So some MSPs believe that as part of maybe their exit strategy, that when they go to sell their business, that there's more value in that business by having Microsoft direct status. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
The only time I would agree if you sell to a big enough MSP that's already a direct reseller. Otherwise, the admin, the overheads, it's just simply not worth it.
Well, thanks for taking the time to join us today. You've been a busy man, Mark. Tell us what's been going on at Circle IT recently. I heard you guys are now part of a bigger organisation taking even more territory in the UK. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, cheers, Phil. Thanks for having me. But yeah, it's been an exciting time over the past couple of weeks. It's been quite hectic leading up to the acquisition. And the acquisition now gives us a very good foundation to kind of move forward and grow the business even further under the umbrella of Arrow. So very, very exciting times indeed.
Hi, thanks for having us. Well, yeah, Wessex IT, we're IT managed service provider. Been around since 2005, privately owned. We're up to about 20 people now. Yeah, we've been into Office 365 since around 2013, so we're slightly late to the party there. So yeah, we're based down in Sussex. Things are going well, lots to be happy about at the moment. Well, our journey with Office 365 and CSP, it goes right back to when we were buying annual licenses through volume licensing, and that was quite a common thing back in 2013. So we thought, okay, we want to do this monthly, and the first option that really came available was a provider, one of the early syndication providers. So we sort of jumped in bed with them for a year or so. We were then able to offer Office 365 on a monthly basis, which was great for our business. And then we had some issues with that provider and ended up around that time having the opportunity to go direct.
So prior to 3 years ago, we used to sell and still sell a lot of kind of traditional tin services, and it was all solution driven. So it was kind of looking at the customer's requirements and then understanding what they needed from that and building a bespoke solution outside of kind of those requirements. The Microsoft solutions then came into the mix. So I moved into the role that I'm currently doing now about 3 years ago, focusing then on kind of our digital transformation strategies within the organizations. And that brought us into a different dynamic with a lot of customers. So we could have very transformational conversations with them about their IT strategy, about business process, benefits, and everything else. And Microsoft then allowed us to do that with a per user, per month license model, if you will, that allowed us to bring a lot of the solutions and technology solutions and simplify them in the main, and then bolstering that with a load of infrastructure services off the back of it in things like Azure. So it's been very transformative for us as a business. So we've transitioned a lot of our customers into that mix, and COVID obviously then accelerated that a lot for customers that needed remote access to various solutions. So it's been quite an investment for us, as well as good rewards off the back from the wins that we're seeing in the marketplace.
So one of the questions we've been asking, because it's a question that lots of MSPs ask us at PAX 8, is, direct or indirect with Microsoft? What's the right choice for every organization? So talk to us about the choice that Circle IT made on that and why.
Yeah, so when the direct relationship came out with Microsoft, I can't exactly remember how many years ago it was now. It must be about 5 or 6, but it was a long time ago. We jumped on that bandwagon very, very early. So we saw an opportunity in the marketplace to partner with Microsoft in a way that we hadn't really partnered with them before. Because whilst we resold licenses, it was always through the likes of Tech Data or Ingram or whoever it would be back in the day, the LSPs of the world, when we had to sell kind of open volume licensing agreements. And the requirements for a direct CSP back in the day were fairly low, should we say. So we already had a lot of the capability that they were asking for as part of us doing this. So when we looked at it, we didn't really know what we were embarking on, truth be told. We knew it was the next evolution of where Microsoft are pushing things, and we had the capabilities to deliver the support, licensing capabilities, and we already had a technology team in play. So initially, it was something that we kind of stumbled upon, and then we realized how transformational this could be for us as an organization if we continued on that journey. So we've developed on that now over the past few years, and we're currently a fairly successful direct partner, I think.
So when I think about what's good and what's bad about dealing with direct, the main thing is margin. Even back in the days when we were dealing with the syndication partner, it was an opportunity to chase some more margin. So that's definitely a big upside. It's perceived to be simpler as well. There's a lot of selling and reselling in our industry, and an opportunity to go buy direct from Microsoft, achieve maximum margin possible, and just have a simpler relationship. There's less to go wrong. We're not having to proxy all of our support requests to another provider. They were the advantages that we saw.
Absolutely, being direct was a differentiator for us. So it's something that there aren't many, if any, partners in the UK, in Wales have specifically. So it was a very good localized differentiator for us when we were having conversations with customers that we were a direct CSP as opposed to indirect. So that gave us a lot of kudos in those types of engagements with customers.
Yeah, okay, interesting. If there are listeners today to this conversation that we're having and they are looking to start their business and make this choice of direct or indirect, what are the factors, you feel, having done both historically and now being direct with Microsoft, what are the factors you think need to be built into that choice?
Right, okay, so taking that into two parts then. So the first part is that the factors that come into it. So the challenges that a direct CSP has over an indirect is you are pretty much self-sufficient. So as that direct CSP, unless you have the onus, the time and inclination to manage that entire practice as an organization of a certain size, that should be a very large discussion point internally within your organization as to how that works. From an indirect relationship, you obviously have the support of an organization that has a team or teams of people managing the whole Microsoft relationship, any news, events, changes, contracts, everything else that come out of the mix.
Yeah.
As a direct, it is an overhead within the business that you have to manage and maintain. And obviously there's risk and reward with two different sides of that kind of decision that you make. One of them being enhanced margin, and so on. There's lots of other things that you have, including the kudos of being a direct CSP and whatever you think or may not think that brings to the table. Yeah. But with that decision, though, there is that overhead, and that can't be underestimated. As a direct CSP, there is a overhead that you have to manage, maintain. There's a load of software that you have to kind of manage and deliver as well. So I think that needs to focus a lot of people on that. There's a lot of potentially hidden cost associated with being a direct CSP as opposed to looking at indirect as well.
If I was doing it all again, or if we were getting into Office 365 now and Microsoft 365, do your homework with who you work with when it comes to indirect. We spoke to quite a lot of indirect providers, and our CSP direct tenant we're restricted now. We can't provision any new business on it, but so all of our new stuff goes through PAX 8. But we did speak to probably half a dozen different indirect providers, and do your due diligence. What are their support provisions like? Have some conversations around margin, and automation and integration. Yeah, that's what I would do. Just take the time to speak to a few.
Well, Philip, if this cloud thing doesn't work out, I think,
ESPN, if you're watching right now, I love doing that. And the thing I love the most about doing those interviews, I love the channel community, right? I love how you ask these guys in various chairs, that are some of them in leadership, others in kind of technical, and they give you brutal, honest answers, sometimes trade secrets as well, right?
Yeah.
And I just love the channel community and how they help each other. So once more, just really grateful that I get to be a roving sports reporter, but also get to be hearing all of these stories of how people can transform their businesses. So hopefully today, and the conversation will help others with this choice, right?
Absolutely, and thanks again to everyone that participated.
Yeah.
Lots of very busy people giving up their time graciously, and not all PAX 8 partners, we should stress. Might have felt a little bit biased, but as is inevitable. But I think it was nice to get a really good cross section of different perspectives, very different sizes of business, different locations, and very different histories as well with the whole Microsoft world, I suppose. So
it's good, honest engagement as well.
Yeah,
so that's the important piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, let's unpack some of the commentary there, and then do get those questions in because we are going to come to them shortly. So I think, look, Philip, to you first. You were our roving reporter, as you so rightly put it. You were pressing the flesh. What was your sort of overall reflection, having spoken to the various different business owners about this topic? Do you have a kind of summation of the issue?
Yeah, I think I would just summarize a lot of the commentary that we had from there, particularly Market Circle and Paul Croker were talking specifically about every business needs to make this choice as an internal organizational kind of review that they do. Mm-hmm. There is increased margin that they can go at, right? They're all quite clear at that. But at the same time, there's an internal overhead that you have to run as well. You have to manage that relationship. There's accreditations that you need to do. There's support that you need to deliver. So it's very much, I thought the stories that we heard today was the particular choices that each business was doing was based on their journey and where they're going. And I think that's the thing that is most important, is that what we want to do today is empower people to be able to make the right decision for their organization. So that's the thing that I think I got out of it the most, out of those conversations.
Yeah. People can jump in though. I think really the whole jump on the bandwagon, the kind of margin thing, that's an instant emotional kind of reaction, is to protect that margin piece. But I think as the conversation progresses, by the time that gets to the bottom line, the resources you need within the business,
the true cost,
yes.
And Kevin, let's come to that point, because I think on the face of it, Direct does pay a couple of extra points, but if that's the difference in your business, you've got something fundamentally wrong, because the margin on license resale is insignificant, right?
Absolutely.
It's certainly not enough to sustain a great business. And so actually some of the more interesting areas from a profitability perspective with Microsoft are the services you can deliver, right? How do you build IP on top of it? How do you package it up and create a high quality managed service where the real margin lives? But also the back end incentives are actually the same on both programs. And this is a really common misconception in the channel, that the really juicy margin incentives you get from Microsoft are the sort of they're seasonal. Typically they're based on a new product launch or a given incentive for a period in a region, and those back-end incentives are actually consistent across both programs.
Absolutely. And again, if you can focus and specialize in some of those areas, then absolutely you can more than make up the differences.
And just coming back to the true cost point, I think Kevin, the work that you and we have done at Wirelive before joining forces with Pax8, Wirelive was quite unique in that we were both an indirect and a direct CSP. That's something that's very unusual. And that meant we know all too well what the burden of being a direct CSP is.
Definitely. I think there's the obvious things. I think we spoke about, whether it was the margin or the tooling, managing the billing platforms, the
finance side is
significant. I think the kind of key one that stood out for me was certainly the support team, like the technical capabilities, the specialists. And I think that challenge is only going to become more and more, certainly as we move forward, because I think that talent is in high demand. So I think that's going to be certainly a key focus and area for people starting this journey.
I think there's another element of what as well, kind of post-pandemic, and you've talked a lot about this on various podcasts and stuff that you've been on, Rob, is that the pandemic has done more for digital transformation than like 10 years of trying to educate and enable and evangelize has done, right? Because we were forced to work from home, to be agile, all of these different things. And there is no going back, right? That's why we're calling it the Great Resignation, right? It's like, so there is no going back. But the companies and organizations that really get digital transformation, they're wanting to leverage their technology. So back to, what Kev calls the big three, right? In terms of the 365 core tool set that Microsoft provide, and then Azure and Dynamics on top of it. More and more of Microsoft's incentives, whether you're direct or indirect, right? The rebate's exactly the same, all of that, still keep your status and everything else like that. So all of that remains intact. But the margin that you're able to leverage from the S of MSP, the margin is far, far higher if you go up that food chain. So I think off camera, a lot of them were talking about, how what we traditionally call distribution, how it's changed now to have more tooling around it to be able to execute in services that's far further up the food chain, that then has more margin, more higher professional services costs, consulting elements, et cetera, to it. So that is an interesting way that Microsoft are taking the business, right?
Yeah, and look, I think it's important to respond to the trends in the market, and it seems fairly clear to those of us that live in this channel world that Microsoft want partners to move to indirect, right? Year over year, they essentially make it less and less favorable to be a direct partner. I mean, let's not dress it up. That's what they're doing. They're making the cost overheads higher. They're making the minimum requirements more onerous. They're expecting you to demonstrate your capabilities around finance and support in ways they never used to. And if you look at Microsoft as a business, there is no better example of a technology company in the internet era that understands how scale through partnership works. And so the reason they're doing this is not because they're lazy and they don't want the relationships with direct partners. They understand that it's a better experience for the channel to work through indirect.
Absolutely. Those partners are closer to those end customers, right? So again, when it's about that kind of, we always talk about the kind of the advisor, right? There's lots of advisors out there, but being that trusted advisor is super key, right? And I think being close, being curious about your customers, understanding what they're trying to achieve, get under the hood of those organizations and then really deliver some value for them.
Yeah, and I think we'll come to questions in a moment, but I think just to kind of round off our thoughts before you hear from the real people as opposed to the waffling panelists, I think let's just debunk a few of these myths, right, once and for all. So back-end incentives are the same, right? So these are the things you shouldn't allow to affect your decisions. So back-end incentives are the same.
Yeah.
Still a Microsoft partner, whichever way you go. They still know who you are. They're still interested in what you do. They still want to highlight the great work that you're part of.
Absolutely. I mean, people behind the scenes in Microsoft, they don't know any different.
It's the same from their perspective, right? You have an NPM ID. It's all the same stuff. Should you retain silver or gold partnership status with Microsoft? Yes, you absolutely should, whichever way you go. In fact, it's actively encouraged.
Absolutely.
Have I missed anything? Anything else that comes up on a common basis? I think that's the summary.
Yeah, I think the other thing is the incentives and promotions that they would be running on a quarterly or annual basis or whatever, they remain the same, right? So it's not like, if you're with Microsoft Direct, you're going to get some off-the-table deal that isn't available to anybody else. So I think that's a key part as well, that the incentives and promotions are exactly the same.
And to that point, the catalog's the same, the products and services you have access to is the same, the RRP pricing to the end customer is the same. So
there's the big drive for price parity, right? As we all hear about that. So that's still going on. So
absolutely. Great. Well, let's take some questions. So we've got a question from Davey Flanagan who says, is the new commerce experience nudging partners towards direct? That's a great question and a big topic at the moment in the channel. So we should probably frame that. So the new commerce experience, if you haven't bumped into it yet, is probably the biggest shift in the CSP licensing model Microsoft have made since launching it, I would say. And it was due to go live in January. They've now pushed it to March. But and there's some debate in the channel about whether this will stick. So as of today, recording in December.
Ooh, that's brave.
We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I may or may not have spoken to some people about that. So as of March, new subscriptions will have to be on new commerce experience.
Yes.
Is the NCE? We'll call it NCE from this point forward. Microsoft love a 3-letter acronym. We unwillingly
comply.
Willingly comply, I suppose. So with NCE, is it pushing people to direct? I think you could see it that way, but I don't think that's really their ambition. I think. It seems to us from our place and, jump in chats that there's a number of behaviors that have been happening in the channel over the last decade that Microsoft really don't like because they don't deliver value to the customer. Yeah. And NCE is, we think, a way of heading that off, trying to cut out the competition or margin to the bottom, right? Giving it away for free for 12 months to try and win the business, this sort of change of channel churn that goes on.
And they're trying to bring some consistency across the various different licensing models, right? I think they've had decades of, as we've all experienced, the pain in some way, shape, or form. Right?
So enterprise agreements, more traditional, perpetually owned licenses.
Absolutely.
So I could never be a politician, right? Because I'm a straight answer, straight shooting guy. So Dave specifically asked a question, which is the new commerce experience nudging partners towards direct? I would say no.
And I'd agree.
There are other factors, maybe size, scale, etc. But I would say new commerce experiences, and for some of the reasons I gave earlier, the terms, the commercials, all of that kind of stuff that you get is exactly the same. So whether you're going to be direct or indirect, whatever a version of NCE or whatever it ends up becoming, it's going to be the same criteria that we all need to work with, whether you made the Circle IT decision and you're direct today, or whether you did the decision that some of the other MSPs like Chris and Paul did and are indirect, buying through their cloud distributor.
Great. There you go. Davey, hope that was a good answer for you. Moving on. So another question, what kind of support would an indirect partner be able to expect from their provider? Is it more worthwhile being a direct partner from Microsoft? So this is around, I suppose, the upstream support that you get through the different channels. Something goes wrong, you need some help. How do you guys see the different experiences somebody gets?
So I think it's a bigger play. What is driving people to indirect, I think, at the moment. Okay,
You think it's the support is the thing?
I think that's part of it. I think is, as a MSP myself, a former MSP owner, right? I'm not just selling Microsoft's products. I'm selling other security products. I'm selling, other backup type products that are needed to be able to help deliver a great solution to my client.
Yeah.
So if I'm delivering those, like the supply chain for me to provide a plethora of licenses that make up the tech stack, as we call it, is getting larger and larger and larger for each MSP. More things to manage, or fundamentally, as we say here at Pax8, right? The provisioning, managing, billing, and analysis of all of those applications for every single user, for every single organization is becoming a nightmare. And I think we've seen a lot of cloud ecosystems, CEOs standing on and saying, I'll give you a single pane of glass, right? All of that, to be able to manage all of these products and services. So I think what we've created at Pax8 is a marketplace, right? That people can provision, linking that into their PSA and management tools. And I think that's the thing. And we're not exclusive in doing that. There's other people that's doing those kind of things too. But that's what's driving, I think, the direction, because you cannot access those kind of services if you are direct with Microsoft. You have to build them yourself.
Absolutely. And I think for me, that's coming into an ecosystem that's building out partnerships and relationships and building rapport. And I think, on the direct side, you've got you're kind of going alone, and your sales motion, you're going alone. I think whereas you come into the kind of the indirect model, I think there's broader, wider opportunity to partner up with other organisations, and I think they're specialists in their vertical or whatever they're doing, and I think so. There's some real opportunity there for some co-opetition, or whatever they call it these days.
Yeah,
co-opetition,
something like that.
Co-opetition.
I quite like
that. Competing in a friendly way.
Is that what we're doing right now?
Nobody comes to rugby.
Okay, so moving on. Annabelle asks, how quickly would a partner be able to go to market after transitioning? So let's say you're direct today and you want to go to indirect, or I suppose vice versa, really. Can we speak to the disruption that might cause and any downtime that might apply?
So
field that.
So I can only answer for Pax8 as the resident evangelist for what we do. So at Pax8, because we understand what it is to live in an MSP's shoes, right? That the phones are ringing today, people wanting help and support. The more quickly, back to your point earlier on support, the more quickly we can deliver support and enablement to the partner, the better we make them look. So my challenge is helping the MSP look absolutely amazing to clear down that ticket and deliver service to their customers. So the quicker we can deploy a license, the quicker that I can clear down an issue, the better in terms of the way that we're doing it. So for ourselves, we really focus on making that happen really quickly, including that initial process that someone wants to come and join to us, can come and bring the business to Pax8 if they want to do that. So if they're already a Microsoft partner, they've got the MPN ID, they can go in and literally they can just do it all as a simple conversion process with a wizard. There is no migration work to do. It is, and I know everyone says this, I'm looking down a camera lens and I say this, I know everybody says it's painless, but trust me, speak to other Pax8 partners and say it's painless. Just because we talked and communicated with Microsoft and say, how can we make this an outstanding experience for our partners, right?
Yeah. And I think, and we've got the teams behind that as well to support. If there are things that people are worried about, then get in touch, and then we've got the support teams in and around and assistance to if there are any challenges, right?
Yeah, and look, it's a tooling challenge, right? I think let's stay objective. If you're thinking of moving from direct to indirect with any indirect provider, the question you need to ask is about the tooling, right? We know our tooling's great because we've spent an absolute fortune developing it with some really smart people. I'm sure there are others who've done that too, but that's the thing you need to really understand if you're going to go through this journey, right? Whoever you do it with. So thanks for the question, Annabelle. It's great. So what would you say to partners who are considering asking their end customers to move to direct when NCE and the price changes come into effect? It's from Lizzie.
Yeah, I think, to answer Lizzie's questions best I can, I think what I'm observing from the market of what MSPs are doing, is they are just sitting this out at the moment. That's what they're telling me that
Yeah.
they're doing, right? Is they're saying, there's a view at this moment in time that some people think Microsoft will relent because they've done that before, haven't they? Right, where they
have,
or that they will change it slightly, And I think, I'd be keen to hear your answer to this, because I think new commerce experience is not a new thing. It's always existed on Azure,
Absolutely.
right?
Yep.
And I think it works on that product. It does, because there are more long-term decisions that people are making over that, as opposed to when it comes to the workforce and the number of users that we got. We want a bit of nimblicity to be able to scale that up or down depending on business demands. And I think that's what people are finding difficult. So I think, to answer Lizzie's questions as honestly as I can, it'll just play out and we'll get to see what it is. But currently what MSPs are doing right now is just sitting tight and just holding.
Yeah, and I understand that. I think I'd add to that, though, is again, that engagement with that customer, have that transparency and have that conversation. I think, honesty is the best policy, and I think that it's, these are things that are changing and evolving around us. And I think we just need to don't shy away from having these challenging conversations, engage with the customers. People don't like surprises, right?
Sure. And I think what you're both driving at is the cost side of the NCE change. So one of the changes that's being proposed in New Commerce Experience is that there's an increase in the cost to stay on a monthly rolling basis with all of your licenses.
20%.
20% uplift on most SKUs, which is pretty significant, I think it's fair to say. And then you can get that down again by committing to fixed annual terms, so 12, 24, 36-month terms.
Right.
Now, to Philip's point, on Azure for infrastructure work, servers, typically databases, things like that, that's a fairly static requirement. Not always, but you can look at a workload, and this is something Wirelive's done a lot of over the years.
Absolutely.
You can look at a workload, you can slice it up, and you can say, right, these things are going to need to be here in 3 years' time, so let's commit to them, get the cost down, right? These are our variable resources. Maybe it's campaign capacity for a Black Friday sale, as lots of people have just done over the last weekend, or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you move into the modern workplace pillar of the Microsoft world, whether that's good old Office 365 or all of the extra frills that are around the edges that everybody's starting to really lean into, security products, compliance, continuity, all of
Teams,
those key products and features. Those teams are much more flexible and much less predictable.
Yes.
Here we are, for example, potentially going to have more COVID restrictions. Suddenly we might all be working from home again. That means we might need more licenses for certain products than we did last month, and then we might not need them again in January. The promise of cloud, I think, was always that flexibility. And so to Kevin's point, if this goes through as it's writ today, the honest conversation you need to have with your customers, I think, is that it's perhaps worth paying more for that flexibility, right? Don't fall into the trap of assuming, well, let's get you signed up for a 12-month fixed commit on this license.
Yep.
Even though it's better for the providers like us, right? Because we all get predictable revenue. We don't think that's often the right call on in the modern workplace pillar.
Right.
So just be really, to Kevin's point, be brave enough, I guess, to have a straight conversation about it.
I equally see it as an opportunity to get closer to the conversation with your customer, right? To understand what their plans are, what's their strategy for 1, 2, 3 years out, right? And I just think, it gives you a great opportunity to have those conversations.
I was at an event in London 2 weeks ago, and one of the biggest challenges is coming out of this price conversation. So what some of those service providers in the room were telling me that they were doing is, so say you've got a typical customer that's got, say, 120 employees, users that's on their workforce. What one MSP was doing is going back and saying, hey, put 100 on a long-term contract, right? And then the others we'll just kind of pay monthly to give it our scalability, because you're locking in that 100 at a sub 20% price.
Yep.
So taking advantage of it, okay? The bigger conversation was having over liability, right? So if that customer now, because like COVID times that we're in, lots of businesses are really finding it difficult
struggling,
to, there's more month left at the end of the money, so to speak,
Yep.
That's what's happening to a lot of businesses right now. You carry that liability, right? So I think there are some big issues that people are going to have to make choices on this. So I found that really, really interesting, that for those MSPs in London, Rob, the issue wasn't so much the 20% differential. It was the real
liability
thing of the liability. Do I really want to be wearing that obligation in my business going forward?
Yeah, and that's it's the same liability, direct or indirect. right?
Absolutely.
Coming back to the topic.
Yep.
And so, back to Davy's question, it plays out in the same way, a lot of these changes, regardless of which choice you make.
Absolutely.
So let's go back to questions. So what are the main things that a partner should look for when considering an indirect provider? Well, I think we've covered a few. We've talked about the migration tooling element, which is a really key thing. I think support's come up a few times. What else would you guys jump on there?
Oh, billing. You've got to talk about billing, right? Because God bless Microsoft.
We don't get paid without a bill.
They're a fantastic company, right? And they'll make sure their bill is right to you.
Oh, you're getting a bill.
You're getting a bill, right? But that's where their obligation ends, right? They say, well, there's your bill. Now you've got to decide, like, who did we order this for? And so that, unless you've got back to your tooling.
So the reconciliation element.
It's a nightmare. And for the conversations that I have with MSPs, that's the biggest piece, is they will have, and I would ask some of you that are listening right now to us, in your business right now, you've probably got some person, Dave or Claire or whatever, it's a 2-day-a-week job doing that kind of reconciliation of the distribution bill or the Microsoft bill and saying, right, what is this for? And making all of that happen. So in our tooling, we're making the management of the tenant. We're also building that into your PSA and your ticketing system, but fundamentally as well, cutting the bill to simplify that process for you so that there's no money falls off the table somewhere.
Absolutely.
You didn't get a bill to claim for.
The pro rata is a challenge, right? I think the number of people have bumped into, and so you can very, very quickly come unstuck with it. So,
I mean, Kevin, you've worked through the kind of evolution of cloud as a service, and you've seen this billing complexity play out in a way that it didn't used to exist, right?
It's huge.
Utility billing on all of these different cloud services is kind of one of the core tenets of why they're agile and why it's a progressive model versus the more traditional, on-prem, which then moved to kind of colo and managed hosting,
kind of fixed costs, locking things
cloud,
in.
Right? Yeah, exactly. On this billing front, you've been responsible for a business that had to do both. So you've had to deal with building out that reconciliation within the business at Wirelive, but also, handling the indirect challenge and kind of rebilling for partners.
And sharing with partners, totally.
I mean, in a word that isn't a swear word, how would you describe that adventure?
It's painful, right? It is painful. And I think, look, you've got to spend a lot of time and investment in automation as much as possible, but there are still aspects of it that fall out of that you have to have people on the ground looking at it. Because, one thing's for sure is, technology is based on logic, but doesn't always follow it, right?
Absolutely. I think we've got our soundbite there. Look, I think so. Just to recap, again, objectively, whoever you're looking at for indirect, right? We don't want to make this just a Pax8 session, although we obviously think we're the best. But whoever you're speaking to, probe that billing question. Show me your billing platform. Don't tell me it worked. Demonstrate it to me.
Absolutely.
Let's do a test run. Let's provision a license, turn it on, turn it off, because it's monthly billed by the minute, right? So that's not going to cost much to do. Just really put it through its paces before you commit to something, because we
100%.
We know how hard this is. We felt that pain ourselves in the Wirelive journey, and now to be part of Pax8 for us is a relief, frankly, to have a platform that does it so well. So billing is key. I think we touched on it earlier. Let's just come back to line card selection. We're here talking in the frame of Microsoft, direct, indirect, but most of our partners are buying 2, 3, 4, 10 other products from us. So it seems like, if you're running an MSP business or an ISV, you're probably bundling your Microsoft stack with a few other things.
Absolutely.
Could you talk to that at all in terms of your selection of indirect? Is that something you would factor into the decision?
Yeah, and I think that's where, back to the single pane of glass, and that's where I'm a big fan, as we've set up this discussion today, and I'll always be a fan of it, like you, Rob, in that everyone has to make the decisions that's right for their business and their vision. So whether they're in Wessex or Wales or Warsaw, wherever they find themselves in, they are the trusted advisor. They know the geography. They know their verticals. They need to make decisions that's right for their clients, right? So they're not going to listen to some trumped up, God bless you, CEO who's going to actually say, this is the way to go.
Look, I'm a journalist today, Philip.
Right. Come on. Because what worked in Farnborough isn't necessarily going to work in any other kind of city or place, right? So the way that we approach that agnostically, say for security, right? There was a there was a time where the world was very yellow when it came to security, right? And we had this great brand that we all sold all of these kind of like where are they today? Because they stopped listening to the customer, right?
Your mate Norton.
Yeah, that's right. So, but there's lots of innovation that's coming into the market, and so what people want to do is they want to manage that, and they want to understand how would I transition that. So, being agnostic for us at Pax8 to be able to say, hey, whichever security vendor you want to go, we've got the kind of best of breed. We've got most of that. So here in the UK, we just got approaching 25 vendors that we've got on our line card right now. They've got more in the US because we're dealing with some GDPR issues that we need to get right and some contractual issues. But specifically for us, we provide full training and support directly around that vendor. Because that's what allows us as a business, because as you were talking about support earlier, Kev, we're 24/7, 365. Right?
Absolutely.
There's somebody available to be able to answer your call. Try us on Christmas Day, right? Somebody will pick up the phone and take your call. So for us, enabling the partner to deliver great service by us really understanding, whatever security vendor that they are using right now, if it's on our line card, all of our engineering, all of our sales engineers, all of our customer account managers and customer success team, all of them know deeply those vendors. And that's the big part of the way that we do business. It comes with the ecosystem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for volunteering to take those calls on Christmas Day, Philip. I'm sure
I'm Santa's little helper.
Support team are looking forward to forwarding those to you. Kevin, on that point, so that blend of products and services, I think, again, coming back to that billing and reconciliation challenge, would you agree that that's the real killer feature there in terms of having not just a great line card of vendors that are properly enabled with great training and the stuff that really should be table stakes, although it isn't often? Is that the magic of it, do you think, from the MSP's perspective, being able to consolidate all of that and reconcile it effectively as well as provision it?
No, I think these are all contributing factors, right, and incredibly important things that you pay attention to, and the devil's always in the detail. But there's another aspect to it for me with in and around the service and the identity of that MSP, and it's as Philip said, it's the selection of the different services they're going to bring to the table, and I think where that partner, they've got a unique owner, CEO, whatever it may be. They've got unique individuals within that organization, and they're making selections on these different products themselves. But bringing all that together to form their own identity, to form, again, setting out what their vision, mission is, and get some real purpose around what it is that they're doing, I think is another real kind of key aspect of it. And I think have that conviction, have that belief. The technology is just exploding, right? As you touched on with COVID and where transformation's going, it's just accelerating. So for me, it's kind of get round or bring come to the table with us and really help let us work with you to thrash out what that strategy looks like for you as an organisation. And I think that's another sort of area in which as an organisation we can help and support.
Cool.
Yeah. And I think to that point, Kev, a phrase that I've pinched off of you is called the hero story, right? Because MSPs really are the knight in shining armor, right?
Absolutely.
There's even back to break fix stuff that still happens, right? Stuff still breaks and it needs fixing, right? Yeah. So when that happens, that you can, whatever part of the country that you're in, that you can go to your local MSP. They genuinely are the hero, right? So the hero has a story. He's got that why over why they set up the business, right? And why a lot of them that I increasingly talk to used to work with some other tech company that didn't care for the company, that didn't care for the customers the way they cared for the customers, or didn't configure things properly, or the governance was rubbish. All of these whys that are there. And I think one of the things I do love in the way that we do business is us understanding their why is fundamentally important in the way that we deliver the services. So if governance, risk, and compliance is a big thing for them, great. Let us help enable your business around that. But if running things operationally lean and you want to drive the cost down and efficiency and everything is really important to you, okay, let's have that conversation to be able to move your business. So I think for me here as a former MSP, what it allows me to do here is to really shape shift as a business to really, what do you want me to be today? because we can play in all these areas based on the technology and the people that we have in the business.
But I think it's a unique position to kind of we've been in those seats, right? So we can have that honest conversation with it. You know, scars and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think all three of us at various points in our formative careers have worked in something that looks a lot like an MSP or an actual, and something that identifies as one. So,
100%.
You know, we do sort of can relate to that pain. I think we'll take one, maybe two more questions. See how we get on with this one. So, this question is from someone who I won't name because I happen to know they are, I don't think, any longer an employee of Microsoft, but certainly were for some time. Many partners want to be a direct CSP because of the access to and the relationship they will have with Microsoft. So that perception of a deeper relationship, right? How can partners decide who to work with when they're selecting an indirect provider to maximize that Microsoft partnership without the direct access? So I suppose the question really is driving at, like, what is it you should be exploring when you're talking to an indirect provider to understand how you can continue to have that exposure to Microsoft in that way that you thought you had before as a direct, or maybe you really, you know, maybe you've experienced you had.
For me, it's like anything, right? Stand out, be different, and I think, but focus on what areas that you want to be famous for.
So you think this is more about the business's strategy than the indirect provider and the access?
I think so. I think that way you get, you know, the attention piece.
I mean, that certainly helps, right? Yeah. But maybe could you give the other side of it, perhaps? Like, you know, what is it do you think an indirect provider does or doesn't do that helps a potential partner get access to Microsoft in that way? You know, whether it's to do joint case studies or, I don't know, get access to pre-release features on the new platform services, or you know, the sort of the things that people tend to associate with direct relationships.
I think the question is set in a place of, you know, many people want to be direct to get access to a relationship with Microsoft.
Yeah.
And you do have a relationship, right? You know what I mean? Believe it or not, Rob, you've got a relationship even with your enemies, right? Yeah. You've got a relationship, it just happens to be a bad one, right? So what kind of relationship do you have is the question that we need to be asking. Is it a great working relationship that you have with someone that really understands your needs and can build your business out as a result of that? And I think, you know, when I was leading Network Group, it was one of the biggest challenges for me to really realize with a lot of big vendors, hardware vendors and others, you know, that we'd be saying, hey, you know, we do, you know, millions of pounds with you. And we'd be sitting down and, you know, I remember speaking to a particular print vendor and he said, and I said, what do you mean and? He says, well, you know, such and such a competitor does that amount of spend in a month, you know, and it was just this realizing how big you need to be for a global organization like Microsoft that are, you know, they're bigger than most companies out there. But to your point, I think it is that you made earlier, which is Microsoft are directly positioning the market in the way that they are by raising the bar all the time in order to force MSPs, right, to go to indirect, because Microsoft know themselves that they will be better served by people that are in their locality, understand their market needs. And so I think that's a big factor in the indirect piece.
Yeah, and I think always important to remember that a business that's as well run as Microsoft is not going to do anything it perceives will impact its growth and its revenue. And they know all too clearly that looking after MSPs and making sure they have a great experience is what helps them grow, which ultimately drives Microsoft's core business, right? So, I think you have to sort of read the tea leaves there a bit and see, you know, the perspective. That doesn't mean it's always easy. That doesn't mean the transitions are straightforward. You know, change is always hard.
Absolutely, the complexity of the tools that are there today is just getting harder and harder and more difficult to manage and maintain, right? So having people that on the ground, having those relationships, those are just key to success.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, there's more questions we haven't come to. I'm sorry if you asked one and we didn't get to it. Please do follow up with us afterwards, and we'd love to talk to you about anything, however small or big, whether it's where I bought these ridiculous socks, or Philip's future as a sports journalist, or why Kevin didn't wear the sparkly gold jacket he has out the back that he could have put on for you. And,
well, it didn't come up as a question, so save it for another time, maybe.
Not come next time. Look, I think just to round off, well, I'll give you both the chance, and then I'll close with my Kevin McLeod moment. Kevin, any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. For me, it's just this being direct, wanting to be direct, and then wanting to get this kind of have this kudos. I think is the biggest mystification thing. I think just get indirect. For me, is not. There's not an argument anymore.
Fair enough.
I think just the power of the channel, the power of the ecosystem. I think that's you're going to get shared success.
Philip?
For me, I would say to any MSP that's watching, thank you. You serve a huge, huge role in our society, helping people, businesses, coffee shops around the corner from us here, where we're speaking from the Farnborough studio here today, that rely on the services that you deliver. However, it comes with challenges for your business right now, okay, over operational maturity and nimblicity and everything, the costs of doing that, and also delivering services to your customers that they need. So I would say, moving more into business consulting and cloud consulting and all of that piece, instead of traditionally selling IT support, becoming more of a business consultant is a key shift that they will have to do, whether they like it or not. That's the way the market's going. And if you're not doing that, you're going to be like
somebody else will, right?
Somebody else will, right? So as you move to that place, it's really make this decision right now and make it ahead of time rather than later on. Over, sit down with your team maybe today and say, right, direct or indirect, whichever you are right now, are we getting the right value for money? And does it suit the vision and mission that we have for our business? Or is it something that needs to change? And I would say is, make that decision right now proactively, because further down the road, it might be taken away from you and you'll be forced to make that decision.
Yeah, don't let it be made for you. I think that's a great sort of closing thought. And so to round up, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we've given you a little bit of clarity on this topic of direct versus indirect, or at least a bit of light entertainment for an hour on a cold December morning, or whenever you might be watching this as a recording.
And if there's somebody watching from ESPN or Sky Sports and they need a reporter,
then give Kevin or I a call. And we'll be more than happy to work with you. Look, thanks for joining us. We are releasing an ebook on this topic, which I've read and is really, really solid. Good. It's just a great objective view of all of the stuff we've covered today, some of the key features and benefits of both routes, which I think would be really helpful if you are going to go through that review process internally. So, if you've registered for today, we'll be sending that out. We'll also make it available publicly. So do hunt that down if that would be of use to you. From us in the studio, thank you, good night, much love.
All the best. Take care.
Take care.